This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
This is Tech Talk, made possible by TM1.
This is Tech Talk and my name is Jeff Sandhu. 10,000, that's the magic number of steps that we always hear associated to fitness. But where did it come from? What does it mean? And what implication does it have for all those fitness apps and trackers out there? It's always funny when you do an episode related to physical fitness, Matt. And as you said before, you have a face and a body for radio.
Thank you for that. I'll have you know, I'm a very trim 65 kilos. I think the computers would probably cough right now if they could. This episode has taken a while for me to get around to, pretty much like anything to do with fitness, because I've wanted to try and combine a few different things. So firstly, the rise of the wearable, by which I mean companies like Apple placing the Apple Watch at the center of their ecosystem, and of course, gambling that our obsession with living healthier lifestyles will be the key for their continued success.
And does this tie in with their approach to data privacy?
I think so. The company has always had a different approach to its consumers' data. That's partly because it's been able to follow a different business model. Apple doesn't really give you something for nothing. You know, its hardware and software packages are always very expensive, no matter what device you're buying into. And whether it's buying services directly from Apple, you know, its film and music streaming services, its storage, its cloud computing, or using its app store to buy third-party apps, you know, Apple is not short of revenue streams. You pay a premium price to enter Apple's world, and then you keep on paying. You know, for other companies, it's a much harder journey to profitability.
And because of their freemium way of approach.
Well, there's that. But even for manufacturers like Samsung and Huawei, because their model is built around you regularly upgrading, they have fewer opportunities to create these ongoing revenue relationships with you. And as you said, you know, companies like Facebook and Twitter have to work really hard to turn us into money. And a lot of our problems with these companies originate from that fundamental disconnect between what they have to do, what they're willing to do, and of course, what we want them to do.
Presumably companies like IBM, Microsoft, and Google, they are more of a hybrid?
Microsoft is actually the really interesting one because Microsoft seems to be cherry-picking from everyone else's business models. It hasn't managed to corner the market for apps the way that Apple and Google have done, Google with Android, of course. But you can see it bringing together hardware and software in the way that Apple has done. It's also very successful in the cloud storage space, like Google and Amazon. And you can see it building this very tightly integrated business ecosystem where it's definitely going head-to-head with Google. But also, by creating this very focused business presence, it's also modeled on the way we use social media tools like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We should probably do a show on the new Microsoft at some point in the future. But certainly I think from a consumer point of view, we still look at Microsoft based on the legacy of Windows and Internet Explorer. And Explorer was actually thrown out and replaced by the Edge browser 4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
4 years
ago. 4
ago.
years ago, but we still think of Internet Explorer. So our view of the company may not have moved on, but Microsoft definitely has.
I'm just looking at our desktop here. Yeah, Internet Explorer still exists on the desktop computer.
Yes.
But so are you trying to get Microsoft to send you free stuff here?
No, of course not. But, you know, I would be happy to try out any of their hardware.
So we've established that Microsoft is fit for purpose. So can we get back to fitness?
Ooh, that was clever. Sure. You know, we make a lot of assumptions about fitness. Some of it's based on science. Some of it's based on what the obscenely muscled calorie junkie at the gym tells us during training sessions. You know, our understanding of the science behind fitness is constantly evolving, partly via a term that we don't hear talked about very often in relation to fitness, which is evolutionary biology. So, you know, if you look at the science of fitness, you do hear about evolutionary biology a lot, but not when we talk about step counts, training, and that kind of consumer commercial side of the fitness sector.
So you're here to tell us how all the information about fitness is wrong, even though you look like you just ate your way through a marathon.
Thank you. I'm going to ignore your rudeness again. One of the reasons is because I read a very interesting article, as usual. It was in the New Scientist, and about some of the assumptions we make about our evolution and the amount of exercise that we need. Another, as I said, is because companies like Apple are placing wearables and health devices at the center of those ecosystems. So if you're building these devices and if we're trusting them to give us accurate health information, then we need to make sure that the devices are also built around sound science. Otherwise, the information they give us may not help us to improve our health or may not be as effective as we think it is. And if those devices are actually built around faulty information, then it's possible that they could actually be doing harm. As I said, the article I'm referencing is from New Scientist. It's titled, "How Many Steps a Day Do You Really Need?" And then it's subtitled, spoiler, it isn't 10,000.
So we hear that a lot. Where does the idea that we need 10,000 steps a day come from then?
Well, there may be some discussion about this, but in the article that I read, it was written by a researcher called Herman Ponce. He alleges that it was a marketing ploy that was dreamt up by a Japanese manufacturer of step counters back in the 1960s. It also equates to the amount of exercise that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the States recommend today, and that is at least 25 minutes of moderate and vigorous exercise every day, and that's supposed to be roughly 10,000 steps. But, you know, when I go for my not very regular medicals, the doctor usually tells me 15 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 or 4 times a week.
So this is a subject where there isn't any real consensus?
Well, the only consensus is that we don't get enough exercise. And of course, that exercise, when we have it, is going to be beneficial to us for a variety of reasons.
Well, that's a relief. I thought we were going to be hearing about your Netflix and chips diet.
In a parallel universe, that would be true. I mean, can you imagine every episode of Modern Family you watch takes you a step closer to that Olympic gold medal?
Yeah.
You know, I would be an unstoppable force. Most people are aware now of why exercise is beneficial. You know, it's great for the heart and the muscles. It regulates hormones like testosterone and estrogen. It can cut the risk of cancer, heart disease, strokes, diabetes. And it's actually really good for our brains as well.
Because it releases chemicals that help to regulate our mood and also moderate stress levels.
Yeah, it gives us endorphins and endocannabinoids. More than that, the flow of blood helps to keep those old brain cells ticking over nicely and helps to stimulate the generation of new brain cells. And also, the stimuli from the exercise is also beneficial to us because you're using your brain to navigate, to negotiate, to balance, all the things that autonomous cars create, you know, petaflops of data to do. But it's slightly less well known, though, that a slothful existence...
Netflix and chips?
Yes, that a slothful existence can actually be a trigger to our natural fight or flight response, which doesn't necessarily make sense to a lot of people. You know, if you're hiking through the forest, you might expect yourself to be more stressed or nervous than if you're watching reruns of Shark Tank with a milkshake in your hand. But according to Ponce, those fight or flight and inflammation responses are always on in the modern world.
You missed out burning calories.
Well, that's the one thing that exercise may not be quite so good at, contrary to what a lot of us believe. And again, this goes back to that thing about evolutionary biology. Research that Ponce carried out reveals that hunter-gatherers in Tanzania are 5 to 10 times as active as people tend to be in Europe and the United States, but their calorie expenditure is still actually the same. And the tests showed that in these people, the Hadza, the body has made adjustments. It expends less energy on certain tasks so it can maintain that calorific balance. So if you're looking to exercise to lose weight, then diet and metabolism are also going to be very, very important.
Presumably, if you push your body beyond that balance, that's when things start to go wrong?
Well, yeah, you know, you have this idea of overtraining, and it does seem that extreme exercise or people who are extreme exercisers, they do have a slightly raised mortality rate. their immunity levels can drop, their white blood cell counts reduce. Female athletes suffering from overtraining syndrome may even stop ovulating. And in case you're wondering if you are overtraining, unless you're pushing yourself to the limit for 3 to 5 hours a day or beyond that, it's probably likely that you're not.
Now, when we come back, Matt answers the all-important question. Is he just naturally lazy? BFM 89.9.
You're listening to Tech Talk, made possible by TM1.
Break from monotony. BFM 89.9.
You're listening to Tech Talk, made possible by TM1.
And we're back. It's MSP together with me, Jeff Sandhu, and Matt Armitage. Before the break, we were looking at some of the advancing science in the field of fitness and why anything with the words salt and vinegar and cheese and onion on the packet is probably not going to speed you to the heights of athletic excellence. Matt, I guess it's less important to ask you why you're lazy, so lazy, and more important to ask why are we so lazy as a species?
I don't think you needed to say lazy, so lazy, but okay, let's go back to those hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. One of the things that that kind of confuses us with terms like mortality rates is that in modern developed societies, we have modern developed medicines. So even if we're not particularly fit, we can still live to quite old ages. Ponce's research with hunter-gatherer societies showed that the elders in their 60s and 70s were extremely healthy. They had some of the healthiest hearts on the planet, and they were very fit and active. But of course, they have much higher mortality rates than our society overall because people are more likely to die from injuries, illnesses, or infections that are treatable and preventable in our societies.
What does that have to do with laziness?
Evolution. If you look at most of the larger mammals, they sleep a lot more than we do. Their life is geared much more around preserving calories. So when we became hunter-gatherers thousands of years ago, we changed our body's response. But, you know, technology moves very rapidly and evolution doesn't. So eventually it may well be that our bodies respond to these lives of comfort and plentiful food by returning us to that slothful state where we sleep a lot. But right now, we're essentially wasting the biology of scarcity on the Garden of Eden that we live in. Being lazy would be fine if our bodies were actually able to cope with us being lazy.
Does this all mean we need more or less than 10,000 steps?
Well, Puntzer's article and his research suggests that more would be better. Of course, how you exercise makes a difference, but in general, he suggests that around 2 hours of fairly vigorous exercise, equivalent to around 15,000 steps, would probably be ideal. And, you know, like most people working in this field, he cautions that anything is better than nothing. If the only exercise you get is reaching for the remote control, then at least reach for the remote control and don't let someone else do it for you.
Which means that the targets on many of those wearable devices are kind of useless then.
Well, it's ironic that our laziness about fitness even extends to getting fit. We want somebody else to do the calculations for us, somebody else to set the goals. And that's kind of understandable because it's an area that a lot of us don't fully understand. And we can fall into the trap then of thinking of these products as being medical devices. And then you have the fairly thorny issue of ethics surrounding the use of these devices when they may or may not be medical devices.
Isn't that a good thing if it leads to healthier populations?
Well, you know, we talk about automation a lot on this show. Last week with Richard, I talked about some of the ways that employers are using automation to replace their human workforce. We also have to be careful that the generalizations and assumptions that come with some of these wearables and health devices don't also direct us down that path to automation. One of the examples we used last week was Uber and its quiet ride system. You know, and the idea that the best way to prepare riders for a world where the car has no driver is to treat the driver as though he or she isn't there. Now, whether it's intentional or not, it's still a very effective piece of conditioning.
Surely, if we don't have jobs, we can spend more time exercising and being fit.
That would be one of the best possible outcomes, though how anyone would afford the designer yoga wear, I'm not too sure. We have to ensure that these devices don't play that same conditioning role. That's one of the advantages that a doctor has. A doctor can look for or tell you if there's an underlying cause for you to have, say, an irregular heartbeat. Most of us, our heartbeats are not as regular as those medical dramas we watch would have us to believe. It's perfectly normal to drop the occasional beat.
So there's a burden around the interpretation of the data.
Yeah, precisely that. What's the point of recording all this information if you don't know what it means or you don't know how to interpret it? We aren't all alike. And as much as these devices learn from us, the information they're based on will be based on the averages produced by studies. And yes, that information will improve over time. The quality of the data will increase because the algorithms behind them will be learning from us and the ever-increasing sample sizes that our data gives them. But still, we are not machines. We are not automatons. Averages mean very little to us at the individual level. For example, I had to wear one of those heart Holter monitor things for a couple of days a few years ago because I'd been using a device and it showed random spikes where my heart rate would suddenly hit way above 140 BPM.
So you would automatically think there's something wrong.
Exactly. Like I said, I'd been using my own wearable and I'd been getting these crazy results. And that's the reason that the doctor makes you write an activity diary. He tracked the spikes to me sitting in traffic jams.
And what did you do?
Well, I've got the luxury of working for myself, so I adjusted my timetable so that I don't travel very often during those times. And I was also able to make some attitude adjustments to reduce those physical impacts as well. But the doctor was quick to point out that those spikes are not worrying in and of themselves.
Let's go back to what you were saying about automatons. Is this a conspiracy to condition us all into think and act the same?
No, at least I don't think so. You have to look at that bigger picture. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy for it to have that effect on us. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy for people to exploit or amplify that conditioning. So we've raised this example on the show before. What happens if a health provider or a medical insurer offers you a lower premium if you agree to wear a health tracker 24 hours a day? Will that policy reduce benefits or refuse to pay out if you forget to wear the tracker or for some reason you stop wearing it?
Especially as we're seeing companies like Amazon that have a hardware division announcing that they're planning to enter the medical service industry.
Exactly. Amazon doesn't have a fitness tracker at the moment. I haven't found anything that suggests that it's an area, they're over interested in, but it would make sense. The company has tried to get into the phone and tablet space with very mixed results. Medical insurance and health trackers would be an ideal way to put Alexa on your wrist and hook you into the commercial side of Amazon's business. Not sleeping, here are some products to help.
Gosh.
Like I said, this is very much conjecture, but certainly it would be hard to view any company having that level of control over your daily life as being something that was beneficial to you, whatever the health outcomes might be.
Do you think we are maybe overstating the risk of these devices?
Well, let's not forget that the technology is still very new. When you go for a medical check, the machines that analyze your heart rate, they measure your blood sugar levels or take the oxygen levels in your blood, they tend to be a bit larger and a bit more sensitive than a watch with some fancy lights underneath. That's not to say that the technology won't get there, but it's why these devices aren't treated as medical devices. They aren't medically approved because, by and large, they aren't accurate enough.
The data could be wrong?
Well, it very much depends on your device. We all know how easy it is to game step counts on some wearables. Back when I used to drive a truck with very hard and bouncy suspension, my wearable would record 10,000 steps on my morning commute, while I'm sitting at the wheel. That doesn't happen so much with the modern devices. But one area that we have seen this massive expansion into is measuring the quantity and the quality of our sleep. There's actually a great article on The Guardian by Amin Sainer, I think it came out on the 17th of June, called Why Sleep Trackers Could Lead to the Rise of Insomnia. Yeah. Now, one of the examples they use is Alana Hare, who's a sleep consultant at London's Royal Brompton Hospital. She's seeing a rise in patients who come in and tell her that they have a problem with sleep.
Because they're not sleeping?
No, they're sleeping.
Oh.
And when she asks them how they feel, they say they feel fine. They come in because their wearable tells them that they're not getting enough sleep or they're not getting enough good sleep. And this goes back to what I was saying about understanding the information that we generate. You know, it's great to have fancy graphs that show how well you're doing, but that information is useless unless you understand what it means. And it's very hard for these devices to track the quality of an individual's sleep. Sleep studies laboratories, they have a lot more equipment. They study brainwave activity. They're looking at how your eyes move. They look at your muscle tension. The sleep trackers that most of us use are much simpler. They monitor movement and they may track your heart rate and analyze the sound of your breathing.
So your results may be skewed.
Of course, it's not going to be the same for everyone, but for some people, you can become obsessed with that data and the quality that it's telling you you're getting. So the idea that you're not getting enough sleep or you're not getting enough good sleep can then become an obstacle to actually sleeping. As the Guardian article points out, sleep clinics are seeing a rise in patients coming in with insomnia that's exacerbated by the same devices they hope will help them solve or manage their insomnia. And of course, there can be a psychological knock-on effect with these things as well. Most of us roll out of bed in the morning and get on with our day. How tired we are or not may be something that's in the back of our mind, but it's not something that we pay a huge amount of attention to. These devices can actually serve to bring this idea that you're tired to the top of mind and start to reinforce those feelings.
So we should just throw away our fitness trackers?
Well, I don't think we need to go that far, but, just remember that these things are there to help you. So for me, that means turning off the heart rate tracking on my Apple Watch because I get more stressed knowing what my heart's doing than not knowing. Similarly, I don't need reminding that I don't get enough sleep. I don't. I know it. So find the functionality that works for you. They're not medical devices. You're not chained to them. If you're using one and you find that you're more stressed rather than less, take it off for a few days and see if that improves the way you feel. Don't quit the exercise. Don't take up Netflix and chip. Don't fit your life around the device either. Fit the device into your life and don't worry. Be happy.
Very sensible advice from Matt Armitage on
I know, it's
a
really
Fun Friday.
unusual.
Yeah, very unusual.
Yeah.
I guess, you get a little bit serious when we talk about fitness.
Yeah, I do have the chips in my bag, though.
Fitness in the digital age. We'll be right back with Geek Squawks after this, BFM 89.9.
Tech Talk, made possible by TM1. To learn more, visit tm1.com.my.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.